They will regulate a militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thanks so much for tuning into another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is great to have you with us once again. A fantastic day in Virginia for gun owners on Tuesday with almost 10, maybe 10 counties or more becoming Second Amendment sanctuary counties. We'll talk with Philip Van Cleave of the Virginia Citizens Defense League coming up here in just a couple of minutes. And as promised, Amy Swear of the Heritage Foundation going to join us talking about the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus New York City case. Unfortunately, Chuck Michelle from the California Rifle and Pistol Association unable to join us, but I hope that we can get Chuck on the program in the very near future to talk about that. And let's get right to our conversation actually with Amy Swear, talking about what she saw from the oral arguments and what may happen next, not only with this particular challenge to a New York City gun law that's before the Supreme Court, but what cases the court has queued up and ready to go if, in fact, they decide that the New York City gun case is now moot. Take a look and a listen. Amy, thank you so much for coming to the program today. It's great talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. So now that the oral arguments are over, we've probably got a few months before we know what the Supreme Court's actually going to do with the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus New York City case. But the transcripts and the oral arguments have been released. Audio will be released later this week, and we can maybe get somewhat of an idea about what the justices are thinking. Although I don't know how many tea leaves you can really read into, 2 or 3 questions that a Supreme Court justice asks during oral arguments,
No, absolutely. And I think the thing that's clear to me is that there are significant concerns, even amongst some of the more liberal bloc members, such as Justice Ginsburg, even Justice Breyer at some point seemed to express that maybe he thought on the merits, if the court gets to the merits of this case, that there are some legitimate concerns, even from the members you wouldn't necessarily expect to have those concerns. I think to me that the question is going to come down to whether you have 5 justices who are going to say that this case is moot, or whether they're going to actually go on to the merits. And that, especially just from the handful of questions you get at oral arguments, is it's just so hard to determine. And I don't think even if the court does strike this down as moot and say, look, there's really nothing we can do here because New York changed the law, I think the good thing is that there are a number of cases in the pipeline that actually would deal with more substantial rights, such as concealed carry generally, assault weapons bans, magazine capacity limitations. And I think the court, even by taking this and at least getting it through oral arguments, is showing, look, we're going to start taking the Second Amendment seriously. There's a willingness to start taking on these cases in a way that there really hasn't for the last decade.
Absolutely. And honestly, that might turn out even worse for gun control advocates. I mean, they have been going to great lengths to avoid Supreme Court review of any gun control law, going so far as to change this New York City law in question. But as you say, this is a law dealing with the transportation of firearms. They've got a case out in conference right now. The Supreme Court does, Rogers versus Grewal, that is challenging New Jersey's good cause requirement to get a concealed carry license. That one deals much more explicitly with the right to carry. And the Supreme Court's sort of been holding on to that case for several months. Again, a lot of speculation about why the court might be doing that. But I mean, it's queued up and ready to go. If the Supreme Court says, yes, New York City did moot this case by changing the law, they can pluck that right to carry case out of conference and say, but we're going to consider this in the spring term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in some respects, if the court were to do that, it could in the long run end up worse for gun control advocates. Because even, in a case like this, when New York Pistol and Rifle, where it's just dealing with the transportation of lawfully owned firearms and not with concealed carry of loaded firearms in public, you can see the court sort of couching any sort of ruling on the merits in terms of, well, this is just for transportation, and then doing what it did kind of after Heller and McDonald and saying, okay, we took our Second Amendment case for the decade, and we'll just kind of see how it plays out. But I think if they were to moot it and then immediately take on something like the case out of New Jersey, I think there's a similar one that hasn't been pending for as long, but a similar one out of Maryland. I know there's some out of Massachusetts with magazine capacity limits. But if it were to take those on immediately, I think that more than anything would be a bad sign for gun control advocates because it doesn't seem like the court would take that just to uphold it.
Absolutely.
So,
on the other
at
hand,
this point, it really is.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, on the other hand, though, reading this transcript, it really bothered me, and it clearly bothered several of the justices as well, that New York City decided to defend this law at trial court in the Court of Appeals. Only when the Supreme Court agreed to hear this case did New York City start freaking out and attempt to change this law to moot this case. And if that's a successful strategy, I mean, one of the things that we learned in the oral arguments is that there are some constitutional issues with this revised statute, right? This continuous and uninterrupted travel. What exactly does that mean? And you had the attorney for New York City arguing, well, it says one thing, but we're going to apply it in a different way. And if there are constitutional concerns about this revised law, well, you know what? You're going to need to file a whole new lawsuit to deal with that. I would hate to see that strategy given a tacit seal of approval by the Supreme Court to tell gun control groups, listen, just keep these gun control laws on the books until we agree to hear a case. Then you can change the law, even if it's still unconstitutional. That will reset the clock and require a whole new lawsuit, and we'll never actually, hear a Second Amendment case. I think that's I would hate to see the Supreme Court, basically tell gun control groups, you got the green light to proceed with this strategy going forward.
Right. And I agree that it is concerning that this has been sort of a play by New York is to say, wink, wink, nod, nod, look, we changed the law. So now there's nothing you can do. And I agree that's concerning. I also think that, if this were any other enumerated right, even unenumerated right, if this were an abortion case, you'd see the liberal bloc sort of exploding over the state, sort of trying to sidestep review in this way. But as I said, I think even if they do moot it, and it's sort of a temporary, victory for New York to sort of reset the clock there. If they were to take on a more substantial case, that would ultimately strike down New York's law, in a broader capacity. I think in the long term, that ends up being a win for the Second Amendment as well. I may not feel like it at the time. It will be a tough pill to swallow if it gets mooted, and New York seems to get away with some of these tactics. But I think, again, if there is a long-term victory in there, it's something we kind of just have to roll with the punches on that one as advocates for the Second Amendment. So it will be interesting to see sort of what the court does here. It's very hard, and it's really at this point a game of wait and see because there are a number of different routes the court can take. Absolutely.
If the court decides to moot the case, do you think that we'll learn about that sooner than we may have learned about, the court's opinion if they decide to take this case? I mean, if you got 5 justices that say, New York City, they changed the law, this case is no longer valid, would we really need to wait until June to hear that, or would we perhaps learn that decision earlier?
No, my guess is if they're going to moot it, and especially if the plan is to moot it and then grant cert still for this term on another Second Amendment case, that we will hear that sooner rather than later. And it's always hard to determine, well, do we mean next week? Do we mean, when they come back in the new year? So it's really, again, a game of wait and see. But if I had to guess there, if it gets mooted, we won't be waiting until June to find out that it's mooted.
All right. Well, again, we will play the waiting game. I appreciate you playing along with us, Amy. Thank you for joining us today, and hope we get a chance to talk again very soon.
Thank you again for having me, and I would look forward to it.
Absolutely. We'll do it again. Amy Swear with the Heritage Foundation join us here on Cam and Company. Now, as I mentioned, it was an incredibly busy day in Virginia with nearly a dozen counties in one day adopting Second Amendment sanctuary county resolutions. I was in Goochland County on Tuesday night. This is north of Virginia, or north of Richmond. I'd say it's an exurb of Richmond, Virginia. It's about 30 miles away. At least the county seat's about 30 miles away from downtown Richmond. A county of about 38,000 people. There were easily 300 folks in attendance. It was kind of hard to tell because the main meeting room was full. All of the auxiliary meeting rooms that they had opened up and they had TVs showing the supervisors meeting, they were all packed. There were dozens of individuals who were standing in the hallway of the county administration building who were listening to the meeting on their phones. It was an incredible sight. And again, I've been to a number of counties and I've seen similar crowds at each and every one of these board meetings. Frankly, whether a resolution is being voted on or whether citizens are petitioning the board to vote on a resolution. So I had the opportunity to chat with Philip Van Cleave of the Virginia Citizens Defense League, who has been attending as many of these Board of Supervisors meetings as he can as well. And he has a pretty great story to tell from Southeastern Virginia on Tuesday night. Take a look and a listen. Phil, thank you so much for coming to the program today. I know it has been an incredibly busy week for you and gun owners across the state of Virginia.
Oh, but it's been a wonderful week so far. I mean, we are just smoking.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, I have a hard time keeping track. By the time this posts on YouTube, these numbers may be a little out of date because I know we have a few more counties that are voting today. I'm planning on heading to Fluvanna County in Central Virginia. Suffolk County is voting today as well. But as of, let's say, as of Wednesday morning, Phil, what are the latest numbers that you have in terms of the number of Second Amendment sanctuary communities that we have in Virginia?
Well, the total right now is 41, and we got 7 more originally on Monday, and then on Tuesday we got 11 more. So that was 18 we went up, and now we're sitting at 41.
That is amazing. Now, not all of those are counties, right? We have a couple of cities. Right. That have also adopted Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions, and really all over the state. You've got one on the Eastern Shore. You've got one in far southwestern Virginia. And that's one of the things that I think is really interesting about this movement is as it's growing, it's also changing a little bit. We've seen a couple of counties that have introduced Second Amendment protection ordinances, not resolutions. You're seeing, again, towns and cities consider these measures. Which also I think is fantastic to see because there's no reason why this has to be a Second Amendment sanctuary county movement.
Exactly. No, we don't want it to. In the end, we want it to be everywhere, as many places as we can get. Yeah, we added the city of Norton and the town of Exmoor. And, but the numbers of people showing up. I mean, Virginia Beach last night, it just blew my mind to see how many people were there. We could spend a whole segment just talking about what happened last night in Virginia Beach. Now they were just being asked to put something in, so they didn't vote on anything yet. But it was just an enormous crowd. 1,000, 1,500 people.
I was gonna say I saw your pictures on Twitter last night. I mean, you had standing room only inside the meeting room, but then outside of the building, it looked like there were 500 or 600 people just standing there in the darkness.
That's right. And then there was, of course, the halls and the sort of a lobby area and all that. There were people all in there. And so it was a big turnout, very, very revved up crowd. We did a few little chants, which you could hear right into the city council room. Even though they're up high and they have thick walls and everything, and all that stuff, shades over the windows and everything. But those chants came through.
I was in Goochland County last night, much smaller, more rural county, but a suburb of maybe an exurb of Richmond, about 30 miles outside of Richmond. And again, same situation on a much smaller scale. The meeting room was packed. Every auxiliary overflow room that they had set up with TVs, they were packed. You had, I would say, probably close to 100 people in the hallways that were listening to the meeting on their smartphones, looking through the window of the door inside where they couldn't get in. And it was amazing. I talked with one county employee and I said, have you ever seen a turnout like this? And he said, I've been here for 7 years. He said, and everybody else I've talked to, nobody can remember anything like what we're seeing here tonight. And that is what you're hearing in county after county.
Yes, absolutely. Well, how about Fairfax County? The number of people there was amazing. They have a huge auditorium for their board of supervisors. The building itself is called the Taj Mahal because they spared no expense, and they have this huge, massive auditorium for and it was full, and people were still, again, hanging out the doors, some in the parking lot and stuff. And again, one of our members asked there, and they said the people had worked there over 10 years, and they said never seen anything like this. So that's in Fairfax.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's truly remarkable. I hope that this energy stays, and I know that it will at the county level. But one of the things that, and maybe this is a question to ask you, Phil, when you've been talking to folks as you've been going county to county, Do gun owners understand, at least the ones that are showing up, do they understand that this isn't enough? It's not like you can just show up at your board of supervisors meetings, cheer when this resolution gets passed, and then go home and think you're safe?
Hopefully, I've had reports from some of our people that some that they were talking to didn't realize that. And like last night, I made sure to tell the crowd, this is just the first volley in what's a war. And we're sending a big volley over. I mean, it reminds me of that night last night that reminded me of those Russian rocket launchers where they got this big square, massive cube that fires out missile after missile after missile after missile. That's kind of what we're sending to Richmond from across the state. And but yeah, no, this is just a battle in a war, and we better show up January 1st, 2020. January 20th, 2020. Third Monday in January for Lobby Day. We need to have an absolutely massive Lobby Day, something that again sets records.
Yeah, we're going to be talking a lot about that coming up in early January. I'm going to make sure that folks know where they can go. I was actually talking about it last night to a couple of the folks there in Goochland, and you get the sort of prosaic questions like, well, how's the parking down there? And I said, it's not great, to be honest with you. You might have to walk a few blocks. You might look and see if you can get enough interest here to take a bus down to the Capitol. But, don't let something like, it's going to be a pain in the neck to park, to stand in the way of you stepping up and speaking out in defense of your right to keep and bear arms. Yeah, you might be a little inconvenienced. That's okay. You're going to be a lot infringed if we don't stand strong.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the whole point. You need to get there. That's just the bottom line. Get there however you can. Just get there and make sure that we have a crowd that everybody's eyes pop out of their heads. And we're well capable of doing it, especially when you just look at what's happening in some of these board of supervisors meetings.
I mean, it's really just remarkable to see, and the response has been fantastic. Look, I don't expect that Fairfax County was going to adopt a segment of sanctuary resolution, but in terms of the rural counties, in terms of even the suburban counties, it seems like each and every one of these places is signing on, and in the vast majority of these cases, the vote is unanimous.
Yes, it's rare that, and I'll tell you what, I'm trying to think if we've ever had somebody actually oppose it. They're afraid to actually oppose it, those that don't want it, so they abstain. Mm-hmm. They don't want to go down as, no, I don't want to protect your constitutional rights, so they didn't abstain on it. But that shows you the power of this thing, too. Most are unanimous.
Absolutely. So we're a lot of the county supervisors meetings take place Monday, Tuesday, primarily Monday and Tuesday in Virginia. We'll have a handful again on Wednesday, I think a couple on Thursday. We've got another wave coming next week and the week after in the state of Virginia. So we're not done yet by a long shot. But one of the other interesting developments I think we're seeing here, Phil, is a number of sheriffs and even in some cases, Commonwealth's attorneys, the local prosecutors in the state of Virginia, who are also saying, hey, you know what? I'm on board with this. I'm going to abide by this. I think the sheriff-elect and the county Commonwealth's attorney-elect in Buchanan County, where they put a Second Amendment protection ordinance in place earlier this week, they're both on board, which is, I think, fantastic. And I got to say, I mean, those guys and these men and women around the state of Virginia who are going to do this as sheriffs and as law enforcement officers, I do worry a little bit that they might be painting a little bit of a target on their back for lawmakers and folks like Mark Harry, the state's attorney general.
Well, yeah, maybe. I don't really know. They're constitutional officers. They're elected by the people. The sheriffs are and the Commonwealth attorneys, but they're the ones that are would be putting a lot of teeth into these ordinances if they chose to stand with the county or city that passed them. I mean it's a brave, gutsy move for them to stand up.
Yeah,
and there's some wonderful ones doing it. Some of these sheriffs are just top notch, and you have to say hats off to some of these guys. Danny Diggs, Sheriff Diggs, down in York County. I mean, again, just an absolutely top-notch sheriff. Really, really is there for the people, and it's wonderful to see that. And if these prosecutors don't want to prosecute again, this law means nothing. But let me tell you, I think just flooding that auditorium and all that stuff up, even in places like Fairfax, I guarantee you, it's sending a message already. I guarantee it. They're starting to attack VCDL. The other side is now over all of this, and they wouldn't be doing that if they weren't scared to death.
No, they're concerned. I know that they're concerned. I've had a couple of off-the-record conversations with local gun control activists in Virginia, and that's the number one topic that they're asking me about. Tell me about these Second Amendment sanctuary counties and what happens, if police are needed. And they've got all of these, sort of scary hypotheticals, and I very calmly address and say, well, here's what would happen, and here's what would happen. But they are really worried. And in fact, I think it's interesting that we have not seen, at least to the best of my knowledge, we have not seen a Board of Supervisors meeting where Moms Demand Action volunteers were out in force. Are you aware of any?
I think they supposedly had like a dozen compared to 1,000, 1,500, whatever we had. They had like a dozen, of which
at Virginia Beach?
Virginia Beach, and one spoke, and a bunch of them left really early. They just walked out and left, didn't speak or anything. They've not been enforced at all in any of these things. Even up in Fairfax, where they were. Hey, look, they're AstroTurf, and I guess maybe Bloomberg couldn't get the money to pay some of them to show up quickly enough. I don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah.
They've not been enforced at all that I've seen. We've had a few people speaking, but the numbers are just I think there were like 8 or 10 of them or something down in Louisa, and then the rest of all those people all on our side. So.
Yeah. Last night in Goochland, they were trying to keep a running tally of folks who had signed in support or in opposition. And last time I talked to somebody who had a list of that running total, it was 289 in support that had signed their name in support, and then two who had signed in opposition to the Second Amendment sanctuary resolution. So you're right. And those are the types of numbers that we're seeing here at these meetings. If folks want to try to keep up with everything that's going on or where these meetings are occurring, the events section of the vcdl.org website, I think, is a fantastic resource, because you all are listing each and every day where these, what county's holding a meeting, what city's holding a meeting, and what time that meeting is taking place.
Yeah, and so you got a calendar. You get on VA Alert, the email alert system. It's free, and that's jumped up quite a bit too. We got several thousand more people on there now. We're sitting at about almost 32,000 now, and that'll tell you what's going on as well. I keep you up to date with more detail. A calendar just kind of shows you what after these things. We're putting out summaries of what happened that night, showing photos of the crowds and everything.
Yeah. Again, it's a great resource. I need to send you an email because Buckingham County right now is not on the list, but I know that their meeting is Monday, December 9th. So I'll get that information to you so we can add that to the calendar. And I hope that there's a strong turnout there. But, again, this isn't, it's funny, Phil, I want to go back to something you talked about just a minute ago when you talk about these folks who are now coming out and attacking VCDL. No offense to you or the organization, but I don't think this movement is being directed by anybody or any organization. This is really as bottom-up grassroots mobilization as I have ever seen. You guys are doing a fantastic job of spreading awareness, of letting folks know when these meetings are taking place. But it's not like the 1,000 people who showed up in Virginia Beach last night showed up because Phil Van Cleave said, hey, come be here. And they, yes, sir. Right? That's not what is happening around the state.
That's right. Yep, it's grassroots, and we're just helping facilitate that and organize it. But it's not us. It's to everybody out there, because a lot of those people aren't members. Some of them really weren't really aware of it. They've been sleeping, and they're now waking up, and they're it's grassroots. It's the state standing up and saying, "Oh no, we're not doing this," and we're facilitating getting everybody together and organized.
Yeah, and that is absolutely critical because, as you say, some of those folks who are now just waking up to what is happening and to what is going to be coming down the road here in early January. We need as many of those folks to stop hitting the snooze button and get out of bed and get active, because this is coming our way, whether we like it or not. And we are going to be talking a lot more about what is headed our way and what we do need to be concerned about, even if we do live in Second Amendment sanctuary communities. But Phil, again, I appreciate everything you're doing right now. I appreciate you joining me on the program and, working on just a few hours sleep here. But I hope that you have a fantastic turnout. Where are you going to be today? Suffolk County?
Yeah, I'm going to Suffolk. Yeah, that's not too bad of a trip for me from Chesterfield, but yeah.
And I'm going to try to make it to Chesterfield next week, because that's, December 11th?
Yes. Yeah, I'm the fourth speaker lined up. We really want a big turnout, because Chesterfield needs a good push. Okay.
All right. Well, maybe we can have you back on and highlight that particular county next week as well.
Sounds good.
All right, Phil. Thanks again, man. I appreciate you checking in today, and we'll be talking again very soon.
Thanks, Cam.
You bet. Philip Van Cleave with the Virginia Citizens Defense League here on Bearing Arms Cam and Company. Now, in the coming days, we're going to be talking with a lot of other stakeholders in Virginia, including county sheriffs, Commonwealth's attorneys that Phil and I had talked about, as well as some of the folks who've been showing up for these Board of Supervisors meetings. As I said, the wave is not done yet. We have another round coming up next week, another round the week after that, but already nearly half of Virginia's 95 counties have adopted these Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions. And I imagine that by the time the anti-gun legislature begins its session in Richmond in early January, we're going to be looking at somewhere between 3/4 and 80% of the state of Virginia backing the Second Amendment with either resolutions or ordinances. Again, it's amazing to see. As a matter of fact, if you don't mind, I'm probably going to cut today's program a little short. Because there is a Board of Supervisors meeting in Fluvanna County, which is a little bit more than an hour away from Farmville. However, it is not one of the evening meetings that is easier to attend. It's actually at 4 o'clock Eastern this afternoon. So I'm going to try to wrap up a little early and squeeze out and head up to Fluvanna County. I was going to go to Amherst County, Virginia on Tuesday, but I got the times confused, and they actually had their meeting at 1 p.m., so I wasn't able to make it to Amherst. Thankfully, my presence wasn't needed. It did pass unanimously, even without the editor of BearingArms.com there in the building. Yeah. So anyway, I'm hoping to go to Fluvanna, which is county seat is Palmyra, Virginia. It's a beautiful small town. I know it very well, and again, I'm expecting that there's going to be another unanimous vote. I can also tell you, and I don't even think Phil was aware of this because this just happened Wednesday morning as Phil and I were talking, Scott County, Virginia, has now approved its Second Amendment sanctuary resolution. So again, this is the pace at which these things are happening right now. It is so difficult. Again, I mentioned this with Phil, and I don't mean any disrespect to the VCDL or Phil or anybody else. It's just that nobody's behind the steering wheel of this thing, right? Nobody is in control of the Second Amendment sanctuary movement. There are folks who are helping to organize. There are folks who are helping to make those connections, to put people in touch with one another, to ensure that gun owners know where their county supervisors meeting is going to be held and when it's going to be taking place. There are things like that happening. But the actual attendance, the surge in support that we've seen for these Second Amendment sanctuaries, that's not being directed by anybody. That's being felt right here in the heart and in the guts of gun owners all across the state. All right, so because I'm going to try to squeeze out a little bit early today, I'm going to give you, I tell you what, maybe tomorrow I'll do a double dose of our recidivism report and our good deed of the day, but I cannot leave you without an armed citizen story. So from KENS in San Antonio, Texas, a concealed carry holder came to the aid of a gas station clerk and shot an armed intruder. This was Tuesday night about 6:30 in the afternoon. Police say they were called to a gas station on Culebra Road. According to police, man showed a gun and appeared to threaten the clerk. There were 2 customers in the store at that time. One of them saw the threat, shot the man, who died at the scene. According to police, the would-be robber did not fire his weapon. The officer at the scene said, quote, they, meaning the customers, took matters into their own hands and were willing to make decisions and live with whatever consequences that came with that. At the time, if they felt that was a threat that needed to be addressed, then those are decisions that could be seen as commendable, but a robbery did not happen as a result. Police said, quote, "We absolutely would not recommend this. However, you take matters into your own hands. In the state of Texas, you can carry a weapon and you have the right to protect yourself and your property. While these were customers and not owners, they felt like this threat was active and they addressed it as such." So we don't have a definitive ruling from police that this was a case of a concealed carry holder acting in defense of another and maybe secondarily in defense of himself. But if that would-be armed robber did pull a gun and point it at the clerk, then that concealed carry holder was absolutely within their rights in Texas to put a stop to that threat. And I would expect that police are going to rule that way. But we'll keep our eyes on this story. If there are any more updates, we will bring them to you. In the meantime, again, thank you so much for being a part of today's edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. We've got a lot more coming up the rest of the week as well. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the program at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, townhall.com's podcast page, and make sure that you're checking out Bearing Arms each and every day as well for the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. You can become a VIP member and get exclusive commentary and analysis that you won't find anywhere else, as well as exclusive editor chats and more. And we certainly do appreciate the support of our VIP members that allows us to go out and do the sort of enterprise reporting that we're doing on the ground in Virginia and soon around the nation as well. Have a fantastic rest of your Hump Day Wednesday. We'll see you back here with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company tomorrow.